Welcome to a Mackenzie Institute Long Talk. Hal Jones was born in British India, was raised in Britain, and began his newspaper career in Canada. It was at CBC Radio that Hal made his mark. He was CBC News correspondent in Washington, London, and Moscow. 40 years in journalism, 70 countries. Every imaginable story from wars and oil rig fires to the kidnapping of Italian President Aldo Moro, the death of popes, and NASA's Challenger explosion. I got Hal into the studio the other day, and the first thing I wanted to know from someone who's been spun and cajoled by the CIA, FBI, KGB, and plenty of others is what mistakes are made by people trying to influence journalists.
The biggest single mistake that anybody makes, and it seems to spread from the bottom end of the spectrum in terms of size and importance up to the very top, in the top levels of government and everything else, is an assumption that somehow you are vitally interested in them and their stories, and that's all they have to think about it. And if they give you the information, somehow you will be absolutely charmed and go away and tell everybody what they think you should tell them.
And what should they be doing?
First of all, they have to understand themselves what it is they are trying to get across, and then figure out how to make that nugget of information as attractive and as interesting as possible, not just to the reporter, but to the audience. You have to first work with the reporter. News is not, there's no big secret about news. You have to try and hook people, and that starts by hooking the reporter to whom you are speaking.
But really, you're asking, even though there's no big secret to news, you're asking public affairs people to be exercising news judgment.
Of course. Everybody does, throughout their lives. They want to tell their friends, their parents, hey, have you heard the latest? Have you heard this? This is the basis of gossip. It's the same principle that one uses in news, except in news you have to be a little bit surer of your facts.
Well, it used to be called the Iron Curtain, but it doesn't exist anymore. However, a lot of people are doing business around the world and communicating around the world. Do you have some advice for people who are trying to communicate with journalists in the developing world?
The same principles should apply, but things are changing only slowly there. So actually, it's probably easier for people to get their stories across in the developing world, because the people who work in the news media in the developing world haven't had the same freedoms to expand their thoughts, their processes, the way we have in the West. So when I expect somebody to treat me with a little more professionalism in the West and try and figure out how I work, in the developing world, that's just beginning to come in. A lot of these parts of the world are very used to broadcasting, printing, etc., what they've been told. So perhaps for the head, the CEO of a large, important company moving into the area, it would be a lot easier for him to get his message across without having to figure out, is this important? Just the fact that somebody from outside is coming in with a large amount of money, or going to set up a factory, or going to hire some people, that in itself is of considerable interest in the developing world.
What would you say is the big difference between radio, TV, and print, because you've worked in all three in major markets?
Let me try radio and television first, because I think this is the easiest one to understand. And perhaps what most public affairs people don't understand is that there is an enormous time factor with television, less so with radio. So radio really doesn't mind if you say something now and change your mind 1 hour from now. They will have it on the air both times. With television, there is a run-in time. First of all, there aren't as many newscasts on television. The time it takes to prepare the item, to get it on the air, is much, much greater than would be in radio. Sometimes public affairs people don't understand this. They will schedule a news conference for 4 in the afternoon, which is not very long for people to get their evening television programs together. So they've got to be aware that if you're going to be if you are hoping to put the bulk of your effort into television, you've got to be aware that the lead times involved. Technology is changing, it's speeding it up, it's making it easier for the folks in television to react more quickly. And let's face it, there's nothing with more impact than live television. But you have to be aware that even to set up a live link takes a lot more time than it used to be with radio, where what I've done in my career when something's going live, just holding up the phone to the speaker and putting it live on the air.
Some of these terms and some of the titles that people have are a bit confusing. Can you run through a publisher, editor, city manager, those sorts of people? I mean, we've seen them in the movies with the suspenders and so on, the front page and all the president's men, but what's your take on the role of those people and what a public affairs person should know?
Well, the publisher, first of all, is, if you like, the figurehead. He maybe the business chief. He can decide which way things are going to go. But basically, the publisher does not get involved in the day-to-day running of the newspaper. He may indeed take an interest in what's going on and decide that he wants to see this in the paper or doesn't like what he sees there. Everybody in the paper can complain about something after it's appeared. But before it appears, the publisher does not have a great deal of control over it.
And there's an owner-publisher like Catherine Graham, and there's a hired gun publisher, professional business person.
And these days, the publishers, because of the concentration of ownership, the publishers are getting to be more and more hired guns, if you like, rather than the owners that can actually control it. I mean, look at the concentration of ownership we have here in Canada, and you can see the number of publishers, owner publishers, is declining quite drastically. Lower down the level, you have the managing editor, various levels of managing editor. My advice to people in public affairs is look at the mastheads of their papers and try and identify who does what. It's a very simple task to pick up the phone and call any newspaper and say, hey, you've got somebody identified as national editor. What does that mean? Print room editor, production editor. Find out, what do these people actually do? And you can very quickly figure out who's in charge of day-to-day stories. If you want to get a story in about your region, you're starting a new plant, you have a new process, then the editor area that you're going to be working in, or the editorial area you're going to be working in, is the city desk, basically. And the city editor will be the person that controls what you're going, because it's a local news story. Now, as we branch out, you start getting towards the national editor. Then, of course, there's the business editor and the sports editor, and these people are in charge of their departments on a day-to-day basis. And then right in the front lines, you have your reporter, who basically is the contact person you have to deal with. Now, this is in print. You might just find somebody who is doing research for somebody else's story, but basically that person is still a reporter. Once the story goes through the reporter, then it goes through various levels of editing, usually with what I call desk people. Used to be desk men, but that's changed, of course. They're desk people now. They edit the copy, they clean it up, they shorten it down, they ask the questions, the tough questions that perhaps the reporter hasn't filled in the holes, and then it moves up the chain. Once it's got past the city editor to his approval, then it goes to, they have a conference to decide how they're going to play the story, etc., etc., and a number of other people get involved. But from the public affairs point of view, know, first of all, the person you're dealing with, that's the reporter. Be aware of the chain of command. Find out who it goes to next, and then you can work your way up. A lot of this you can do yourself.
And you've got your weekend editor and your science editor and your so on and so forth. Would you say that it is a good strategy to, when in doubt, send it out? Because does the weekend editor talk to the science writer, and does the science writer talk to the city editor? Does the page makeup person talk to the publisher? I don't think so, do they?
Every news organization, not every newspaper, every news organization is different. There is absolutely no substitute for knowing your news media in the area in which you work, in the area for which you are responsible. Go out and actually find it. I'm absolutely amazed that I run into people who are media relations officers, public affairs officials, and I will say to them, when was the last time you actually visited a newsroom to find out what was going on? I did this just last week, and it's amazing. They don't know. They haven't taken the trouble to make the most basic steps to find out who their clients are. You can't do this in any other business. Why would you want to do it in this one?
How about the editorial board? People find that quite a mysterious, august body, but it's just a few people sitting in a room deciding what tomorrow's editorial is. What is your strategy for meeting with them and influencing them?
Well, the editorial board, as you say, is a mystery, and sometimes it's a bit of a misnomer as well. There is an editorial board, and you're right, they sit down and decide what they're going to do in terms of the editorial stance of the paper and all the rest of it. However, if you want to influence that paper, you can request a meeting with the editorial board, and when that happens, you may quickly find that the editorial board has expanded. It's not just whoever writes the editorial, but the reporters who might be interested in that area. It may be somebody else from outside. Maybe even the managing editor or the publisher will decide to sit in because it is a subject in which they are interested. So it's fairly elastic.
And it's not like an audience at court. You can get a hearing, I assume.
You can get a hearing. They will ask you tough questions, and you can stand up and defend yourself, and you can even complain about the newspapers and the way it approaches your story, your company, your issues, and things like this. It's a very good forum if you can get their attention. But let me warn you, they're not the easiest people to get hold of, because everybody, of course, wants them. So you better have something interesting you want to tell them, and a subject that you can, in which you can interest them.
There's a phrase that I don't like in media training, and it's called message tracking. And I liken it to what Richard Nixon used to do, and he'd say, well, I'm glad you asked me that question, Hal, and then he'd proceed to say whatever he wanted to say. And it was very transparent, very obvious. One night, Ted Koppel said to someone, you're very good at getting your sound bites out, but would you mind answering the question? I assume this really annoys most journalists, but is not only annoying, but quite ineffective with a print journalist who can sit there and just turn the page on his or her notebook and keep asking the same question. Your perspective on message tracking?
It is true that any journalist at any time can tune you out. You can say what it is you like, and there is absolutely no law and no system that you can force them to listen to you. By all means, have your message prepared and try to get it out. And then sometimes there is no alternative for you to stand there and do that, depending on the circumstances, depending on whether it's a crisis or whether it's a nice story or whatever it is. You want to get your message across. By all means, defend yourself, stay there, stay close to your message. The reporter may say, well, you didn't give me what I wanted. Then surely it is up to you to take that message that you want to get across and try to figure out how to make it interesting to that particular reporter for the particular audience that you're aiming at.
Now, I've joked that the Pentagon, the CIA, the KGB, and everybody tried to spin you. Seriously, though, does it work differently, or should they use different techniques if they're in the government or the military or the private sector, or is the advice the same for all?
The advice is generally the same for all, but let's face it, the rules are different for politicians. Politicians are answerable to nobody but the electorate. So it's very difficult to say your audience, is going to round on you. They've got 4 years to correct their mistakes. Most other people don't have that luxury. Politicians know it. They have a lot more leeway. The people who work for the politicians know that the politicians have that leeway as well. Sometimes the people who work for politicians are their own worst enemies because they refuse to accept that maybe, just maybe, there is a good story to get out which is quite separate from the life of their politician, and indeed may help their politician in the long run.
Any general advice for spokespeople?
Know what it is you're trying to say, and not just on the specific story that you're trying to get across, but the background of what it is that you're trying to say and why you're doing it. I'm constantly amazed, and I always was when I was in journalism, when somebody would come up and say, this is today's story, and I'll say, that's fine, but I also have a memory. I remember what happened last week, what happened the week before, or last year, and they would be totally flummoxed. They wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about. They've got to have the whole picture and have it be able to place it in context before they're going to have my respect as a working journalist.
Hal, thank you very much for sharing those perspectives.
Any views expressed here are not necessarily those of the Mackenzie Institute, its speakers, sponsors, or supporters. But the Institute is dedicated to fostering public discussion, debate, and education about security matters. Google the Mackenzie Institute to join the discussion. The Mackenzie Institute is grateful to its sponsors and supporters. Some of our short pods and long talks are a result of the support of Heathbridge Capital Management Limited, the National Post, and Dundurn Publishing.